Hello, how are you? I have some incredibly exciting book prize news to share with you today. You know, several months ago, I made a video talking about how I'm a judge this year for the Costa Book Awards in the first novel category. And since then, I've been reading many debut novels, so many books, and I've been wanting to discuss them and talk about them, but obviously I couldn't do so openly because of the whole judging process. And, you know, judging a book award is like a full-time job because I've been doing so much reading for this, but obviously it's a labor of love because you know how much I love reading all of the time, and it's been wonderful finding so many exciting new voices, you know, reading these debut novels. So it's been absolutely wonderful, and it's been great too as well, like judging this alongside two other judges. So there's the novelist Jill Dawson and also Debbie James, who is the owner and manager of Kibworth Bookshop. And we couldn't meet in person, obviously, because of 2020 and circumstances. So we were able to have Zoom meetings and have discussions about these books that we've been reading. And we had such great in-depth discussions about all of these books for hours and hours on end. And, you know, I wish I could give you some like hot gossip that we sort of had falling outs with each other and like big disagreements, but honestly we got along so well with each other. They're such intelligent and kind and open-hearted readers that, you know, we were able to connect with each other and have really great discussions about so many books. But then after, you know, these long discussions about all these different novels, we were like, okay, we have to come up with a short list of 4 books, and how are we going to do that? So we decided off camera to pick 4 books out of this big pile of books for our shortlist that was going to be, you know, our personal picks. And then we were going to show them together on camera simultaneously. And we did that, and we picked all of the 4 same books. So the decision of what was on the shortlist was absolutely unanimous, which was really wonderful. So these are the 4 novels on the shortlist. And so in no particular order, just going by author surname in alphabetical order, we have Big Girl, Small Town by Michelle Gallen. There is The Family Tree by Sarish Hussain. There is Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. And there is All the Water in the World by Raney. So these are the 4 novels. And obviously, following a lot of book awards, I know there is lots of politics all around book awards and you know, discussions about biases towards like certain books or other, but honestly we selected all 4 of these novels because of the quality of the writing, and we felt completely absorbed by the stories. We just completely fell in love with each of these 4 novels, and they're such different stories, but they just completely absorbed us into the worlds that the authors had created, and we were completely immersed by them, and we laughed and cried. There were actual tears as we were discussing some of these books. So I'm going to briefly go through them all now with you, but I'd love to know what you think in the comments below if you've read any of these, or if you're interested in reading any of these now. We can have a discussion about it. I'm really eager to share and discuss all of these books with everyone. So first off, we have Big Girl, Small Town by Michelle Gallen. This is about a character named Magella. It's narrated from her perspective and tells a week in her life. She lives in a small Irish village in Northern Ireland, and she works in a chip shop, and she has a fairly monotonous life. She has a quite adversarial relationship with her mother. Her father disappeared during the Troubles, and she's been largely anonymous in her town, but recently her grandmother was found murdered, and this has centered the town's interest on her, and she's become a figure of speculation and intrigue, and so she finds this attention quite unwanted, and so we follow her thoughts and her process as she lists things that she's not very keen on in her village and in her life, and that makes it such a funny and and tender read. I really felt close to her character, but it's also a heart-wrenching experience seeing how so many people in the local village, sort of dismiss her and overlook her and, sort of look down upon her in certain ways. And I think of this novel as sort of a cross between Anna Burns' novel Milkman and Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, those two novels. But to be honest, I enjoyed this novel so much more than either of those books. I think it's sort of likened to Milkman because of the Northern Ireland connection, and it's narrated from the perspective of a young woman who sort of doesn't want the attention of her local village. And in the description at the top of the novel, it describes it as a cross between Milkman and Dairy Girls, that wonderful comedy TV series. If you've seen that, if you haven't seen it, I'd really recommend that as well. But yeah, also Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine because the narrator is autistic, although it's never explicitly said. She finds it quite difficult to know how to relate to other people in around her, and so she sort of has to learn that behavior and then just sort of follow it. And she is such a fascinating character that I just loved reading this story. Then we have The Family Tree by Sarish Hussain. This is the story of a British Muslim family that begins with a tragedy. At the very beginning of the novel, the wife of Amjad dies after giving birth to their newborn daughter, and she is the second child of their family. And so it begins with this horrible tragedy and follows on from there to tell the story of this family over many years as the two children grow up to be young adults. And it's all about their trials and tribulations. And the story really fully encapsulates all of the humor and heartache of family life. There are so many aspects to these characters' personalities and their interactions with each other, which are very warm-hearted and endearing. But then there are certain events which are really tragic, and they have horrendous obstacles that they have to overcome, both like personally and as a family, and they sort of break apart and come back together as a family. So you get this whole story of family life. But I found it really valuable sort of following this because it also follows, there at certain points of recent British history. And, having lived here in London for so many years, I recognized, many of these events, but then I was able to see them through the lives and the perspective of this British Muslim family. And it gave me a really different look at and, perspective on this recent history. So I found it very valuable in that way, as well as being, such an enthralling family tale as well. Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. This is about three different characters that form an unconventional family with each other in modern day Trinidad. So there is a very spirited and willful character named Betty and her shy son Solo, and a mysterious man named Mr. Chayton that becomes very good friends with Betty. And they sort of form this household with each other after Betty's husband dies. And they're a very tight-knit group, but then after one particular night when the truth sort of comes out about certain past events, then things kind of unravel and they split apart from each other slightly, and you follow their different stories in such a heart-wrenching and beautifully human way. I felt really strongly for each of these characters and could see their different perspectives so strongly, but also the ways that they are brought into conflict with each other. And so it's just such a wonderful story, and it's frequently described how the language and voices in this novel kind of lift off from the page, and I felt like it really came alive for me. I just enjoyed their voices so much. And I know there's some hesitation, especially when reading Caribbean writers, that because a lot of the language is in sort of the dialect of Caribbean voices, but you become very accustomed to the language if you're not familiar with it very quickly, and it's very easy to read and understand. And the story is so funny, it carries you along, but like with many of the other novels, there are some really heart-wrenching touching moments in it as well. And I just found it so gripping, and it deals with some very heavy subjects like domestic violence and self-harm and violent homophobic attacks. But it also shows the tenderness of friendship and the many different forms that love takes over the course of our lives, and how our relationships with people, the people we love most in our life, how those relationships change over time. It's just such an enthralling and wonderfully told story. And then finally on the list is All the Water in the World by Raney. This is such a heartbreaking story. It's a tale about Maddie, who's a 16-year-old suffering from cancer and undergoing treatment. So you know it's a heartbreaking story, but it's a dual narrative that's told partly in her voice and then partly from the perspective of her mother as they're undergoing the challenges of this treatment. And I have never read a story like this before, you know, that tells the story of a teenager battling with cancer. It's such an important story, but also the way it's told is so beautifully done and told with such warmth and gives such dignity to the characters and their relationships with each other, and all of the love and the anger that they feel as they undergo these trials. It is such a courageous story, and I'm so glad to have read it, and I hope many other people read this as well. So those are the 4 novels on the first novel category shortlist. But you know, the wonderful thing about being a judge on this prize, because you know I'm such a fan of book awards, is that I both get to be a judge for a certain category, but I also get to the wonderful discovery of finding what's been shortlisted in the other categories as well. So it's sort of like the best of both worlds. And I want to briefly go through the books that have been shortlisted in the other categories. So first off, there is the novel category, and I am so excited and happy to see Monique Roffey's novel The Mermaid of Black, Conch on this list, because I have read this novel. It's one of my favorite books of the year, so it's so wonderful to see it getting recognition like this. And this is the story of a Caribbean island and a mermaid that is found by a fisherman, and then the fallout of that as he tries to protect her, and while doing so he falls in love with her, and it's about the outcome of that. But it also tells sort of the history of colonialism in the Caribbean. So it's a fantastical tale, but also a very human one. Then on the list there is Peace Talks by Tim Finch. I've not read this. This is about a man living in a city and undergoing international peace negotiations, and how the only person that he can really confine in is his wife, who is present but who is also forever absent. Then there is Perinasi by Susanna Clarke. This is a novel I've been so excited to read and really looking forward to, about a man who lives in a mysterious large house filled with all these artifacts that he's cataloging, and then he sort of discovers about the story behind them and the reason why all those things are there. It's meant to be a very mysterious and thrilling and imaginative story. And then finally there is The Less Dead by Denise, Mina, and this is a crime novel, but it's about a woman who discovers her birth parents for the first time, and that her mother is dead and was murdered many years ago, and that her mother had also worked as a sex worker. And it's about her relationship with her aunt, her newly discovered aunt, who is trying to find out what happened to the mother. So that sounds like a very thrilling tale. Then there are the 4 books in the biography category. So there is Dear Life by Rachel Clarke, about the author's experiences caring for her father in the final years of his life as he was suffering from cancer, but also her work in a hospice and working with many different people facing the end of their life, and how obviously the most important things in life come to the forefront when they're in that condition. There is also Ghost Town by Jeff Young, about his experiences experiences growing up in Liverpool and how obviously the cities around us sort of shape us in our lives, but how our memories like impact our families and the city around us as well. There is The Louder I Will Sing by Lee Lawrence, and this is about the author's mother was wrongfully shot in a home raid in 1985, and sort of following that case and trying to find justice for that case, but also about the experiences of growing up as a young black man in Britain today. And then finally, there is The Man in the Red Coat by Julian Barnes, and this is about the Belle Epoque, the period in French history at the end of the 1800s and before the First World War, and following many different people in that time that sort of shaped society at that time, who were both heroes and some were villains. And it's very fun. You can see in the inside cover of this book portraits of many of these different people. And obviously I'm a big fan of Julian Barnes' work. And he's, a big fan of French culture. So I'm really interested in his perspective on this period of French history. There are also 4 books in the Children's Book Award category. So there is Wranglestone by Darren Charlton. There is The Super Miraculous Journey of Freddie Yates by Jenny Pearson. There is The Great Garden by Meg Rossoff. And there is Voyage of the Sparrowhawk by Natasha Farrant. And finally, there are the 4 books in the poetry category. So there is The Air Year by Caroline Bird, The Historians by Avon Boland, My Darling from the Lions by Rachel Long, and Citadel by Martha Sprackland. So those are all of the shortlisted books. There are lots and lots of books for us to read and enjoy over the winter months. I'm really looking forward to reading some of these books in the other categories. Like I said, let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of these books, particularly any of the first novels, because I feel very, very passionately about all 4 of those books and very proud and excited to discuss them and talk about them, and that other people are going to be reading them. It's really wonderful. The winners in each category are going to be announced on January 4th, and then between all of these winners, an overall winner is going to be selected, and that will be announced on January 26th. So we have that to look forward to, but in the meantime, there'll be lots of reading that we can do. Obviously, being a big fan of book prizes, I'm going to be really excited and eager to follow all the chat and discussion around this year's prize, and I'm so excited to put these books in the hands of many friends and family members. I hope you take a chance on reading them. If you haven't read them already, I would really love to know what you think about them. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for following along, and happy reading, everyone. Bye-bye.